All right, so let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Central Asia Program Seminars. My name is Sébastien Pérouse. I'm a research professor working with the Central Asia Program at the IRIS at George Washington University. So today I'm really happy to host this seminar, which is co-organized with Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty on a very important topic, which is China's military presence in Tajikistan. And important why? Well, actually, of course, for plenty of reasons. First, everybody knows that for 20 years, China has been expanding its presence in the region. I mean, its economic and even political influence. And while Central Asian countries' main military and security partner is Russia and is likely to remain Russia, China has been more and more involved in these sectors these last 8 or 10 years, especially in Tajikistan, but not only Tajikistan. And second, the situation in Afghanistan with the return of the Taliban to power and the real or perceived security issues that this implies for Central Asia, in particular, the countries bordering Afghanistan, all of that raises question and is likely to increase Chinese engagement in the security sector. And all of this, of course, raises question about China's goals, about the impact of this military cooperation. This raises question on Central Asian relations with China and, of course, on the positioning of Central Asia in the regional geopolitical scene. So it is all these questions and others that will be addressed today by 4 excellent speakers on Central Asia. We will have Reed Standish, Salim John Ayubov, Erika Marat, and Parviz Mullah-Jalal. So each of them will speak between 10 and 12 minutes, and then we will have a 15, 20-minute Q&A session. Before starting, please feel free to send your question in the chat box, and I will we will ask them during the Q&A. So we will start with Reed Standish, who is a correspondent in Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's central newsroom in Prague. Reed is also the author of the China in Eurasia Briefing, which is a monthly newsletter tracking China's growing footprint from Eastern Europe to Central Asia. And before joining RFERL, Reed worked as an editor at Foreign Policy magazine in Washington and as a magazine's correspondent in Moscow. So Reed focuses on Chinese influence and foreign policy, and he has reported on major China stories such as Belt and Road Initiative projects and the internment camps in Xinjiang on the ground. So thank you all for being here today, and Reed, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Sebastian. Thank you, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm going to talk today a bit more about Beijing's perspective and what is motivating this security push into Tajikistan. And a lot of this is, I think, based off my own reporting and reporting done by my colleagues from Radio Free Europe's Tajik service, which Salim John will probably talk a bit more about in depth when he gets the floor. But for myself, I think it's really important to understand where China is coming from when we're talking about this. What is the kind of the Chinese point of view and what are the motivations? My general take is that even though this is a presence abroad, China views this more of an extension of its domestic security process or presence that is focused on Xinjiang, and a lot of it is motivated by Beijing's fears and anxieties over Central and South Asia, becoming a staging ground for extremist groups that could potentially attack China or target Chinese interests throughout the region. So there's a lot of elements to Chinese security cooperation with Tajikistan. There's things like organizations like the SCO, there's bilateral exchanges, there's military exercises, But I think some of the most notable examples are two bases inside the country. One is located near the Afghan border, close to a small village called Shaimak. And another was recently announced in October, which will be funded by Beijing in Gorno-Badakhshan. So for the base along the Afghan border, this has Chinese personnel operating along it. And it appears to have grown in recent years. Both Dushanbe and Beijing officially deny that this exists, but reporting done by Radio Free Europe, by myself, by Salimjan, and by our colleagues in Tajikistan, as well as other outlets, this shows that this base is very much exists and is very much active, and that it's expanding, and that actually the Chinese personnel are playing a leading role there. They're operating border patrols along long stretches bordering Afghanistan. And also where it's never been completely confirmed, what kind of Chinese personnel are actually there. Reporting by the Washington Post and some others have pointed to the Chinese personnel being the People's Armed Police, or the PAP, and which is distinct from the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, which is China's main military force. This distinction is quite important because the PAP played and still does play a major role, in the repression of Uyghurs, with the internment camps and everything that's happened in the last few years in Xinjiang, and just also the general security inside Xinjiang. And this fits with what we know about China's security footprint in Tajikistan, which is very much focused around issues to do with, terrorism, the sort of three evils that the SCO talks about, a big focus on Uyghurs, especially, militant Uyghurs or just Uyghurs in general, and a lot of fear and anxiety about potential blowover coming from Afghanistan. The goal for Beijing is to, create an added security buffer from its actual western border, and to extend that more, beyond into Central Asia, really kind of extend that buildup that's been happening inside China in Xinjiang out around it to give it that added layer of security, so to speak. So the facility, if we look now to the facility that was announced in October, obviously this hasn't been built yet. We just have the announcement that this was coming into effect. And I think this fits with the similar pattern that I was just talking about, but obviously has some crucial deviations. For starters, this is not a military base. And at least from what officials have said, there will be no Chinese personnel there. Rather, China is funding this. It'll provide expertise to build it. And I imagine there could be some training and exercises done through it in the future, although that last point is obviously speculation. But in general, as I kind of wind down here and then get ready to pass the floor over, I would say Tajikistan just in general, I think it's very noteworthy, when we're talking about cooperation with China, because it's shown itself to be such an enthusiastic partner for Beijing, to a degree that other Central Asian countries, which also have pretty good relationships with China, they haven't really been able to accommodate Beijing to the degree that Dushanbe has been willing to. And I think kind of one final point, I think when we talk a lot about this, I don't see this as a sort of aggressive or kind of, expansionist sort of role that China is playing here. This isn't to have some massive security hold over the region. I don't think that this is something that Chinese policymakers are maybe super excited and eager to have to do this, but they're doing it more because they feel they have to. They're very worried about the security situation in the region, and also that Beijing has, I think, quite limited faith in Tajik forces, and so they feel either they need to supply and train them themselves, or in the case of we're talking about the base along the border, actually just do the border control activities themselves. And so I think that, moving forward, how this relationship evolves, I think is going to be super fascinating, as a journalist and someone interested in this region, something I'll have my eye on. And I think also something important to watch is going to be the dynamic with Moscow, obviously, which has an eye on what what China is doing in Tajikistan. You know, Russia obviously has a huge security presence there already, and has for a long time, and you know, very much is quite territorial about Central Asia with China when it comes to military matters. So I think that's going to be an important dynamic to watch, and I think China is very aware of this. They're treading quite lightly. They don't want to step on Moscow's toes, but that also feels like something that's inevitable to happen in the future. So maybe on that note, I will hand the floor back over to you, Sebastian, and I'm curious to see what everybody else has to say.
Thank you very much, Reid. So our second speaker now will be Salim John Ayubov, who is the director of RFER's Tajik service. Previously, Salim John was a senior broadcaster with RFER's Tajik service, and also project director for RFER's Central Asian Newswire, a platform that aggregates original RFER reporting and all the information for Central Asian media seeking independent news. Salim John has worked for many Tajik print, radio, and television outlets and covered a wide range of issues in Tajikistan, and he has produced 2 short documentary movies on Tajik issues. We Build Resilience, released in 1986, and Perpetual Returning, released in 1989, and he also published several books, with most recently 100 Colors, Tajiks in the 20th Century, which was published in 2004. So Salim John, thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I think Reid brought a lot of materials about the problem. So if you remember the news that Tajikistan approves construction of a new Chinese-funded base next to the Afghan border and at the mouth of Wakhan corridor, spread around the world mostly because of radio. Also, whose journalists were the only representatives of media outlets inside of the parliament at the time when the session was on. And afterwards, they fold up under the pressure of the Tajik authorities. They asked us to bring all the recordings, video recordings, and asked to take down the article, the news. But at the time, the news is already all around the world, citing by many other international media outlets. So, and one of our commentators joking that the Tajik parliament made a mistake. Why they have done this session open to media? Because many of Tajik Chinese agreements or memorandums or have been approved by the parliament in the sessions behind closed doors. And this one was a kind of mistake. Of course, he's joking, but yeah, but by thinking about the reaction that happened afterwards, it's looking like yes. And this new base funded by China is not the first one. China already funded a lot of military or paramilitary objects in the Tajik territory, in the Tajikistan, even alongside of the Tajik-Afghan border. But many of them were small, and as he says, the approval of those documents happened behind the closed doors. And the same, the news made a lot of sounds because of what was happening in neighboring Afghanistan after the Taliban takeover, and when the Tajik Taliban moved to the Tajik border, and at the time members of Uyghur groups also appointed by Taliban to oversight Tajik-Afghan border. Second, because, as Reed mentioned, because of the first, let's say, Chinese military base in Tajikistan near the Shaimok village in Morgov region of the Gorno-Badakhshan Autonomous Oblast. And we worked together with Reed to finding out about the Morgov base, and especially after the Washington Post article in 2019. So I can say that every point made by the Washington Post journalist confirmed by what we found on the ground. And even we found more. We talked with locals who by chance visited nearby, or with the Tajik militaries who served inside of the base. So I can say this, that the base is located 132 kilometers from the center of Morgab, and the distance from Shaimok village is 12 kilometers. The base located in the Tegermesu Valley, which directly goes to the south to the Vakan corridor, and and this valley have a road which is could be easily used by anyone who want to cross Afghan-Tajik border and to move to the north. And if you remember, there was a point in a Washington Post article that a German group of mountaineers interrogated by Chinese soldiers in Kukbas in Bazarik Gunbad region. The Bazarik Gunbad region far from the Tajik-Afghan border, about 20 kilometers. So it means the base is controlling the whole area. And as our sources are saying that inside of the base, they have seen about 40 pieces of equipment, it means special military machines, vehicles, quadricircles, drones, and so on. So, and according to the sources, three groups of soldiers are there, 45 militaries from China, 45 militaries from Tajikistan, and 45 militaries from Afghanistan. And since August 15, they have been rotating, all three countries rotating militaries every 2 months. But since August 15, since the Taliban take over, the Afghan personnel is the same as was before, sent by previous government. For the journalists, it's very difficult to find out more than what and that information have been collected piece by piece during almost close to one year. And for us, it's very difficult to find out more, because, as you know, both countries deny that even existence of this base on the Tajik territory. And yeah, and about the new base that will be constructed in Ishkashim region of the Gorno-Badakhshan Autonomous Region. So it's looking like one base will oversight the northeastern valleys that goes towards China, and the second base, we don't know if it will be operated by Chinese, but at the point, as was pointed out at this parliament session, their instructors, Chinese instructors, will be there for the training purpose, and the whole equipment will be brought from China. So this base will oversight the second, let's say, easy crossing valley from Afghanistan to Tajikistan. It's Ishkashim, and through this again, it's very easy for whoever if wants to cross the border and to move toward the north. So yeah, and yeah, basically what the information is very scarce and difficult to confirm. Some of them, neither Tajik nor Chinese officials are ready to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Solemjan. Now we'll have Erika Marat, who is an associate professor at the College of International Security Affairs at the National Defense University. Erika research focuses on violence, mobilization, and security institutions in Eurasia, India, and Mexico. And a recent book, The Politics of Police Reforms, Security Against the State in Post-Soviet Countries, which was published in 2018 by Oxford University Press, explores conditions in which police reform projects succeed and why they fail in countries with recent authoritarian past. So, Erika, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for organizing this panel. I agree with previous speakers that there is so little that we know, and we're really reading the tea leaves here and trying to understand what's going on the ground in Tajikistan. I want to start my presentation by saying that whether this installation or base is military or not military in its nature is really not relevant because of two reasons. I find it to be a military installation or base for two reasons, because it is introduced in reaction to what's going on in Afghanistan, the new dynamics in Afghanistan, that's one. And second, because of just the nature of how Tajikistan's security sector developed since the Soviet Union collapsed, and the role that the Interior Ministry plays in Tajikistan's security setup. It is different, and it's more militarized compared to other countries in the region and former Soviet space in general. And the recent development, it's going to further expand the military role and functions of the Interior Ministry that is traditionally performed by armed forces in other countries in the region and in the former Soviet space. First of all, in general, in former Soviet space, police, they deal with internal security challenges, and they are constructed, so the police as an institution constructed to support the political regime, whereas armed forces, so defense ministry, the main function of defense ministries is to react to external threats, and that's normally the dynamics in former Soviet space. But what we see in Tajikistan is because of the civil war, both Interior Ministry and GKNB play a supporting role to the armed forces, and they contain some of the most professional special forces that deal with threats of insurgency and terrorism. And they have been, their role has been continuously expanding since the civil war. And we see that by how Tajikistan sends its SOBR, so rapid reaction forces, or spецотряд, sorry, I'm confusing languages, спецотряд быстрого реагирования, how they participated in numerous trainings with CSTO, NSCO, and in bilateral trainings with MPS as well, including in Nagorno-Karabakh for years now. For the past decade, that has been a common occurrence, more so than for other Central Asian countries or CSTO members. They also participate, so SOBR, have been repeatedly deployed in calming situation or dealing with situation in Kharok, so across Nagorno-Karabakh, but also played a significant role in the armed clashes with Kyrgyzstan earlier this year. So it is Interior Ministry and GKNB participating in military actions domestically and at the border with neighboring states. So again, these are the functions normally, especially when it has to do with external threats, these are the functions performed by defense ministries. Now, what are the declared functions of the installation, the new installation, Chinese-funded installation? Again, reading these little reports that we have, particularly from, mostly from RFERL, that has been the most informative in this case. We don't really know, so the functions, the declared functions range from organized crime to something coming from Afghanistan. It's really not specified. The lawmakers that have been cited in our RFERL reports, they say that something has to do with Afghanistan. We don't know that. And that can be a whole range of threats, of course. That can be anything from Taliban incursions to ISIS-K to all the other smaller groups that exist in Afghanistan that can potentially challenge the integrity of Tajikistan's territory. And if it has to do just with organized crime, let's say with drug trafficking or radicalization in Tajikistan, from Tajikistan perspective, not from Chinese perspective, then it is, of course, the role of the Interior Ministry to deal with these threats. However, if it's something external and it has to do something with Afghanistan, and especially armed threats from Afghanistan, that is definitely Defense Ministry's role. And we also know that other troops, and I don't know, I'm curious what Sullivan John and others would say here, other troops would be also based in this installation. What are those other troops? Are they Gekenbe troops or are they Interior Defense Ministry troops? That's something to be seen as well. What we see is with this new development is the further, not only further militarization of the Interior Ministry, but also the blurring of the line between where do the military functions of the Interior Ministry and the Defense Ministry's roles begin. So this line is further being blurred, and that's also problematic. For Tajikistan, especially in light of upcoming changes in the leadership, when the president chooses to transfer power to his son, and if we see any opposition forming in Tajikistan in reaction to this power transition, how will Interior Ministry react? Will it be, will we see similar dynamics that we see in Belarus? Because I think in Belarus, the lines between Interior Ministry and Defense Ministry are similarly blurred, just like in Tajikistan as well. So it is problematic, and I think for China, it is also a very convenient place to engage because of how MPS can deal directly with Interior Ministry, something that something that MPS would not be able to do in other parts of Central Asia, including in pursuing its regional security goals. That's it from me. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you so much, Erika. And last but not least, we have now Parviz Molodjanov, who is a political analyst, an Orientalist, and freelance researcher from Tajikistan. Parviz earned his doctoral degree in Islamic Studies at the University of Basel. He's also a member of Inter-Tajik Dialogue, which is an international peacemaking initiative during the civil war in Tajikistan. He's a member of the research group of EUCAM, EU Central Asia Monitoring Project. And Parviz has worked with various international organizations and agencies such as Human Rights Watch, UNCHR, UNDP, and ANZADP. And he's the author of over 40 research articles and publications. So thank you for being with us, Parviz, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. My task today just to discuss the issue of the Chinese military presence in Tajikistan, especially in Gorno-Badashan, and I would cover the issue of the the overall processes behind the decision-making, behind the decisions made by the Tajik government. First of all, why the Tajik government made this decision? What were the incentives? What were the factors that made the Tajik government actually to come to such conclusion? Because for many years we heard from the various observers and also officials, independent scholars, that Tajikistan is not going to allow, and Russia also, first of all, is not going to allow any other military bases in Tajikistan. And within the last several years, we see the totally opposite picture. And the peculiarity of Tajikistan is the decision-making process is not transparent. Therefore, I mean, there is a lot of speculations about this issue. We have, we don't have access to the decision-making level. And actually, in Tajikistan, the decision-making level is concentrated within the very narrow, extremely narrow circle of officials. And they make such decisions without actually taking proper analysis, without taking, without actually making expertise, without asking the opinion of independent observers or opinion of local civil society or society in general. Therefore, there is a lot of speculation concerning the nature of the military bases of China in Tajikistan. There are speculation that it's a full-time military base. There were also some speculation this is a security frontier post built by China for Tajik forces. This information came through the Tajik media. There is also information that this security post, a training camp, to be used by both sides. It also information disseminated by some Tajik sources. But most evidences we have in mind today, in our hands today, convince us that this is a temporal military post or base, which would be used mainly by China. There is also a peculiar feature of the decision. This is the Russian influence, the Russian involvement, because Dushanbe would never be able to make such a step without previous consultations and approval from Moscow. We know that Russia traditionally is very sensitive to the idea of having any military presence, about the possibility of having military presence of other states in the Russian so-referred influence zone. And I personally also doubt that Dushanbe would dare to make such a step without permission of Moscow. And this, we have also some confirmation from sources in Russia, through my contacts as well, that actually there was a kind of agreement between Moscow and Beijing that Chinese actually assured Russians that they are not going to use, that they are going to use this base only for temporal purposes, only for a period of time. They stated that they're very concerned about the ongoing situation in Afghanistan, and they would like to take some preliminary measures. And they finally got the agreement from Moscow. And after the agreement, Moscow give this permission, Dushanbe proceeded with the conclusion its own agreement with China, and they gave permission for the military bases based and instead probably they received something from Beijing. I mean, According to the Tajik official sources, there was some agreement concerning rendering military support to the Tajik army. But we don't know exactly, because which is usually a phenomenon with the Tajik-Chinese agreements and contracts. This is usually kept out of access of the society. And it's really exclusive. What was behind the decision of Dushanbe? First of all, this is security concern. This is a serious and raising concern about the situation in Afghanistan. In the northern provinces of Afghanistan, we know that several leading commanders of Tajik jihadists recently received important military posts in northern Afghanistan. For instance, head of Ansarullah, which is the most radical Tajik jihadist group based in Afghanistan, which is also closely related to Daesh. The head of this organization is in charge for 5 near border districts of Afghanistani Badakhshan. And there was also information from various sources that the Tajik jihadist has concluded several agreements with the other jihadist group from post-Soviet countries about potential joint actions throughout the Tajik-Afghan borders within the several next months. There is also Iran. I mean, the troublesome case of Iran. This is alarming signal what is going on in Iran. Moreover, although we know that during the last 2 years, the relationship between Tehran and Taliban were quite good, and we know that Iran even prevented the anti-Taliban resistance to fight against Taliban during the last summer. There is also the issue of the Chinese lobby within the Tajikistani government, in Tajikistan itself, which is very powerful. They lobby for the long-term presence, the long-term projects, the joint projects with China, both in the field of economy, political cooperation, and security cooperation. And probably there was also their role that actually pushed their influence, that actually pushed the Tajik government to conclude this agreement with Beijing. A very interesting issue about the Russian involvement, as I mentioned, that according to the Russian media, Lentaru, which was published just yesterday, the Russian military base received supplies and reinforcements in Tajikistan. It's actually not a new phenomenon, but this is the overall process over the last several months. They also redeployed their troops to the border areas recently. There is also information which is disseminated just recently, just yesterday, on the Wagner ЧВК, the military private company Wagner, run by Prigozhin, which is close subordinate to Putin. That Wagner started the recruiting process, and it also announced that those people would be the recruited militaries would be brought to Tajikistan. And Wagner is going, allegedly, Wagner is going to control some parts of the border. Why? It's also explained by the Russian sources why ЧВК Wagner is going to be brought to Tajikistan, because as it was explained, otherwise several international agreements should be ratified, and Tajikistan and Russia do not have time for that. Therefore, the fastest way to secure the border is to bring to the border the private company. There is also several Telegram channels in Russia have informed just recently that Russia and Tajikistan have plans to locate about 5,000 Russian troops near the border areas. So we can see now that there is intensification of not only Chinese presence but Russian presence in Tajikistan, and probably this is a Russian response to the increasing Chinese presence in the region and in Tajikistan as well. With regard to the civil society, there is in Tajikistan an opinion of the public opinion in Tajikistan. There is raising but internal concern today. So we don't have open reaction so far, as the information about the extending military presence of China in Tajikistan is not shared to the wider public. So people are not sure what is going on. On the other hand, such a exclusive character of decision-making process it mitigates the reaction of the society. But on the other hand, we can say that there is a growing concern and growing discontent within the society. There is a lot of speculations in the public social media, and I think that in the future the reaction would be very increasingly negative. The major question and the last question, whether China is going to keep its promises and to leave the occupied territories of Tajikistan in the future when the situation in Afghanistan will be stabilized. And this is a big question because it raises many other questions, many other aspects of correlations between Tajikistan and China, between the Tajik government and Chinese government, between the role of Chinese lobby inside the country, the reaction of Russia, etc., etc. I personally doubt that China would leave those territories. First of all, because I mean, we can guess that the conflict in Afghanistan would prolong for longer term. So this is a long-term conflict. It would take many years. So the Chinese militaries would have enough time to strengthen their presence in Tajikistan, and they have all reasons to explain their presence. Plus, actually, as we know that Dushanbe is in heavy debt to Beijing. Chinese have in their hands all leverages to influence the situation and to influence the Tajikistani decision-making.
I'm so sorry. Can you try to wrap up in 1 minute? Thank you.
Already finished.
Sorry.
Okay.
So sorry. I'm so sorry. No, thank you all. I mean, thank you for your presentation. So we have, of course, a lot of questions. We have about 15 minutes for the Q&A session. Let me maybe start with a specific question, which I think is very interesting. Is there anything known with certainty about the legal status of the land on which the Chinese bases are built? I mean, recognizing that, and as Boris mentioned, that decisions are not transparent. Long-term leasing relationships seem to be the PRC's favorite mode. So it would be interesting to determine whether this is a multi-year arrangement or multi-decade joint arrangement with respect to property rights. So does any of you has information of that? On that, sorry.
I can pipe in and talk about what we know and what is more that we don't know. So, I mean, a lot of, the kind of details that you asked for, we don't know. Things we do know. So, the base along the Afghan border, this used to be an old Soviet installation, and that there was an agreement, a few years ago, around 2017, 2018, where China got the rights to be able to, basically build back up, invest in and control a series of outposts, old Soviet ones along the Afghan border within Tajikistan. In terms of time frame, how long these rights exist, we don't really know. In a report from the Tajik service, which I helped on, we referenced a document in there that was brought forward, which it more just references a meeting between the Chinese defense minister and President Rahmon, saying within there is a proposal from Dushanbe about basically giving giving the Chinese free reign to stay as long as they want at that base, and for them to be able to operate it as their own, however they see fit, in exchange for further military aid and investment in the future. Whether that was agreed to or not, we're not sure. But as with a lot of this stuff, this is China and Tajikistan are not, it's hard enough to find out these kind of things in a open society and democracy when you're a journalist, and doubly so if you're dealing with two governments like China and Tajikistan. So we are sort of still trying to figure things out and poke around in the dark.
All right, thank you very much, Reid. Unless anybody else wants to add anything, maybe let's move to the next questions. We have some questions about how people in Tajikistan react. I mean, do you about on this Chinese increasing military security sector? Do you anticipate that this Chinese growing involvement in this sector could feed further some fears that part of the Tajikistani people, but also expertise, have regarding Chinese presence? How is this analyzed locally? And do you think that this could provoke especially adverse reactions in the regions where the government of Tajikistan is more challenged? I mean, we've seen this week some demonstrations in the Pamir. So do you think that this could have a bigger impact, for example, in Pamir? So generally speaking, how people in Tajikistan react to that?
I would say that the reaction is negative, totally negative. The negative reaction covers the entire society, regardless of the social background, or ethnic background, or regional background. Probably if taking into account this negative reaction, the Tajik government decided not to disseminate information about the bases. The first information, the first data we received about the basis, about the secret agreements between the Tajik and Chinese government, actually all those information came first of all from Russian media, and only after Russian media started to cover this issue, there was a reaction also from local media as well. So this is my probably. John has some other opinion, I don't know, but this is my reaction.
Yeah, I agree with you. As we have been reading comments by the users on our webpage or social media and talking to the people, yeah, the reaction mostly negative, especially because of some publication in Chinese media that China still wants more lands from Tajikistan. There was I don't remember the title of the newspaper, and the story was republished in many other media outlets in China. We have a colleague that he's reading, he worked in China for 8 years, and he joined our team, and he's reading Chinese media. So, and he made a story that what is a kind of press review that what the Chinese media is writing. And there was a lot of articles on Chinese media that not some part, but the whole Tajikistan and even the whole Central Asia belongs to China. And it was written by people who titled themselves experts, historians, and so on. And when we published this story, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Tajikistan contacted us and said that, you know, everybody can share their opinion. It's the opinion of some historian, but we know for sure that nothing will be published in those type of Chinese media inside of the China without permission of the Communist Party. And but finally, when there was a lot of discussion among Tajik historians who denied, who even some of them even pretended for Xinjiang, for part of Xinjiang region, and said if the two countries will continue those territorial claims, they will go nowhere. Then finally, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Tajikistan invited Chinese ambassador and asked to take down those articles. And in 3 days, all those articles were taken down from Chinese media. But recently, we have seen again, they are appearing here and there. So having in mind those claims and seeing a growing Chinese military presence in the country, of course, many people will be worried. And another point that somebody put on a question that pointing out to the Gorno-Badakhshan autonomous region, we know we covered recent events in this region, and we know there are a lot of problems that could bring more those kind of situations. So by the constitution, giving land or allowing military base to the Gorno-Badakhshan autonomous region, the government should go through some legal actions like referendums or discussions in the provincial parliament, receiving approval by this local parliament, and then to do this. So the Pamiri people in Gorno-Badakhshan autonomous region accept this as a kind of intrusion to their legal rights. So overall, from all the sides, except the security concerns from all other parts, it will bring negative attitude of the local population.
Thank you so much, Salimjan. Still, I mean, maybe to go on with the reactions, the question is also how, a question we got is how this Chinese increasing security presence in Tajikistan is viewed from other countries, not only from Russia, but also, for example, from Kyrgyzstan. Is that something that raises concern? Meaning, for example, that in Kyrgyzstan, considering its weak defense system, China might be more and more involved in the security system too, with some potential impact regarding xenophobia, which is also a problem too. So do you think that this also has an impact on other Central Asian countries?
I assume it's for me.
Yeah, if you want. yeah, sure.
So I think, there is a common misperception in general about xenophobia in Central Asia, I find. I mean, there is, of course, when it comes to land, when it comes to mineral resources, there is a certain unease, and especially, you know, military bases, there is a certain unease about Chinese influence. But overall, there isn't this widespread fear of Chinese influence because of how China is involved in so many different projects, not just security projects. So it's really hard to see which opinion prevails. Of course, when there is a report of something new like this installation, the quick reaction is that it's worrisome, people are nervous. But overall, I think, and we analyze with Marlene Laruelle, we analyze media coverage, local media coverage of Chinese influence in Central Asia. Or Chinese relations with Central Asia. Overall, the tonality of media reports, and of course, media reports don't necessarily reflect public opinion, but overall, the tonality is quite positive about what China is doing in Central Asia. And I was looking for a graph that I presented earlier this year at Columbia University on the number of military and security contacts between China and Central Asian countries. And in most countries, it is at the same level as with Russia. And in some countries, and I can't quite remember where, which countries, it's exceeds now what Russia is doing. And those contacts are usually, meetings between ministers, drills, agreements, China giving out uniforms or equipment. So it is there. It is very much present and very much on the level of what Russia is doing already. And we do see some reaction, but overall, I don't think that in general that there is this overwhelming concern across Central Asia, especially voiced publicly.
Thank you, Erika. To go back to Tajikistan, its impact of Chinese presence, we have a question about this impact of this growing military and general Chinese presence in Tajikistan on the CSOs and the NGOs working in Tajikistan, especially in, for example, in remote areas like Pamir. So do you think that this Chinese presence could have an impact on their work?
No,
I don't think so.
Not Chinese presence by itself, but the overall security situation in Badakhshan. Yes, because the security situation, both in terms of external threats, and both in terms of internal instability and tension. Yes, it makes a great impact on the entire life within Badakhshan and Tajikistan, and also makes impact on the presence and work of international and domestic NGOs and agencies.
And if keeping in mind the places around Morghab, as mentioned in the question, I could say that there shouldn't be concerns especially from the Chinese base. As Parviz mentioned, if the security situation aggravates, so it will affect everybody. But having in mind that the Chinese base is here and it's difficult or dangerous for the NGOs, it's not right feeling. After Reed's and our article published mid-October, the latest news is that the commanders of the base asked all the militaries not to visit Morghab anymore. Previously, they have been visiting Morghab for buying some goods and talking to the people. Even we have several pictures. But since mid-October or late October, so the shopkeepers are unhappy that saying that no one is coming. And we heard from our sources that it was official command not to buy anything from Morghab market, and everything will be provided from the China.
Right. Thank you so much, Solimjan. I mean, I'm sorry we're getting to the end of the event already. Maybe just to put this Chinese presence in Tajikistan in a wider geographical scope. We have a question that do you think that at some point Chinese influence could be challenged by other countries? I mean, one of the persons in the audience was saying that it seems that the EU announced this week that it would invest in infrastructure in the region. So could the EU or any other country really compete with Chinese influence in Tajikistan or more generally in Central Asia?
I'm happy to give a quick answer, and anyone can jump in after me. I just, because I was covering the Global Gateway announcement earlier this week. And from what I understand with Global Gateway, even though it has a pretty sizable and impressive figure behind it, from talking to sources at the EU Commission, the focus is mostly going to be on Africa for that. I don't So simply, the US, the EU, the Japan, everyone is kind of getting into this kind of the global game of influence with infrastructure thing now. But I don't think that Central Asia is really going to be the battleground for it. And that I don't expect the West to really be paying a lot of attention there. So I still think, when it comes to building infrastructure, when it comes to economic investment, China will still be the leader in Tajikistan and probably in Central Asia. But of course, that's only one type of influence you can have in a country. So I think in Central Asia, probably the trend we're seeing, it's rising Chinese influence, but it's kind of actually a bigger kind of Eurasian melting pot also happening, and Russia's never really going to go away either. So.
Thank you, Reid. Anyone else wants to add anything on before we close this event?
I would say that we have already a kind of duumvirate between Russia and China in Central Asia, in Tajikistan, first of all. Russia dominates traditionally in the security sector, and Chinese started to dominate the economic sector, in finance sector. So Tajikistan is in debt to China heavily. More than 50, according to other sources, almost 70% of the Tajik foreign debts comes to China, belongs to China. So it's a really serious situation in Tajikistan. That's why the Tajiks are so concerned. So it's not really xenophobia. They have distinguished between xenophobia and the concern, but concern about the future of the country. First of all, taking into account what is going on in Xinjiang, taking into account that the cheap Chinese products coming to the country actually undermines all possibilities and potential for the development of industries, light industry, first of all, inside Tajikistan. It undermines also the future of the small businesses inside the country. So it's a huge concern coming out. So it's accumulated now within the society. It's a process of accumulation. And unfortunately, the Tajik government just disregards it. But I think that in the near future, it would come to surface sooner or later. And the consequences to the stability within the country would be very serious.
Thank you, Parviz. Erika, Salimjan, do you want to say final words before we end? Salimjan? No? Okay.
I think if the overall security situation will remain at least the same, so there will be no change, but growing Chinese presence, not only military, but on every possible ways. And someone asked about how it's serious the threat from groups who are in Afghanistan. At the beginning, in mid-August, many people have been thinking that the next September there will be something big on the border, something big on other Central Asian countries. Even myself have the same kind of feeling, remembering 1999 and 2004 invasion of the Islamic group, Uzbek Islamic Party. But nothing is happening. So it's looking like, in case if nothing extraordinary, so we can witness that the growing of Chinese presence until the red lines are indicated by Russia. So, but we don't know what will happen afterwards, because Russia is mostly engaged in Ukraine and other with Europe, and probably it's again placed on hands of China.
Thank you very much, Salimjan. I know we have still many other questions, but we're late. We really need to conclude. But this really means that we can organize many more events on this very, fascinating topic. So I would like to thank our four speakers for their great presentations today. I would like also to thank our audience for their participation in the discussion, even if I know some of you will be frustrated because we couldn't address all the questions. But again, let's meet again for another event on this topic at the Central Asia Program or on any other topic. So thank you all very, very much. Have a good day, have a good afternoon, or have a good evening. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.